Hello, my name is Taylor Carlson, and I am an English teacher currently working in Japan. I teach both elementary and junior high school at the moment, though that may change to elementary school in the next month or so. While I have been teaching in Japan for 10 years, in March of this year, I also taught briefly in a small private school in the US, which is my country of origin. I have taught in a few different environments while in Japan as well. I have taught in a technical college for 4 years, as well as a language school for 1 year. The rest of my time in Japan has been spent in public schools. It has been by far the best working experience for me in Japan, as teaching kids is a lot of fun, and there's no need to be responsible for selling things or for recruiting students. I think originally I got interested in teaching while taking courses in my undergraduate degree in anthropology. I was taking a couple courses in Japanese language and culture, and I became interested in the idea of living and teaching in Japan. After I began teaching here, I realized that I needed to learn a lot more about language education, and that has since entailed me spending a lot of time working on developing my teaching skills and knowledge. So I want to talk about my strengths and weaknesses. My strengths are that I can keep students' attention by using learning through play. I have a grasp of how to make lesson plans that are able to help children through the different stages of learning the target language. I can generally teach in English using little supplemental Japanese, and I have a good grasp of teaching pronunciation through phonics. Some of my weaknesses include I do not have as in depth knowledge of students' learner needs as homeroom teachers or Japanese teachers of English do. Also, I may at time forget to assess students' progress or understanding of the lesson target. This has happened a couple of times recently where I've noticed I'm not keeping tabs on that. Also, at times I can get too playful and students can lose track of the task at hand. We can get so into games and that the class can get a little bit wild at some points. And also, I kind of feel uncomfortable with team teaching. That's been happening a lot more recently with some changes in policy, and I'm still kind of struggling to kind of find my role as a team teacher. During this practicum, there are several things I want to work through, including the points I just mentioned. I want to try to find a balance between learning through games and activities while still being able to keep students on point. In addition, I want to work at developing my ability to work with other teachers. According to Medges 1996, both teachers who are native speakers of the target language and those who have learned the target as a second language both have strengths and weaknesses. For example, while native speakers may have more in-depth knowledge of natural language like idiomatic or colloquial speech, those who have learned the language later in life have a much deeper understanding of what it is like to learn the language, and they may be much more intuitive as to what will be difficult for learners and how to explain the language. With this in mind, it seems that team teaching, while having each other's strengths taking the forefront, the lessons can be more balanced and quality in nature. Most importantly, I think that by working with other teachers, I can help overcome of my own weaknesses, as they happen to be some of the strengths of the homeroom teachers and Japanese teachers of English. They tend to be more aware of students' needs than I am. They also have a much better understanding of when students are not taking the lesson seriously and when the lesson needs to be stopped to encourage or discipline students. I also want to work on ways to change up different lesson formats. Generally, I follow a set pattern of a warmer followed by a jazz chant, with phonics, then usually moving on to introducing the vocabulary and doing some pronunciation with that and drilling. Then we usually move on to a vocabulary activity, which is typically a game where they can practice the vocabulary more. And then we move on to the target language explanation and a drill activity of that. And then that's followed by a target language practice game or activity, and then a more communicative mixer type activity, and then an assessment activity near the end. While this generally works well and follows the format for the city's program, when I've watched other teachers' lessons which interpret the city's lesson format more loosely, I often feel that a change in pace could lighten up the classes. In fact, when changing up lessons, I have found students seem more engaged after the change in lesson format. Because of this, I hope to change up some of the lesson formats some and diversify activities. I hope that by doing more lesson collaborations and observations that I will be able to implement this. I also want to be more consistent in using reading and writing exercises in my elementary school classes. Here are some of my short and long-term goals. My long-term goals are I would like to join JALT, which is the Japanese Association of Language Teachers. This can help me stay in touch with the more academic world of teaching after graduation. Also, I'd like to attend a conference. This can help me make more connections and network with other teachers in order to discover new ideas and opportunities for learning about teaching. And lastly, of course, I'd like to complete a master's degree in TESOL. Here are some of my short-term goals. I'd like to develop ways to interact more with teachers and discuss lessons in my daily schedule. I'd also like to create alternative ideas for lesson structure and format. And I'd also like to develop more ideas for lessons that can help facilitate learning and encourage participation in the classroom. Here are some of my priorities and strategies for professional development. I'd like to initiate more cooperative teaching, highlighting our different strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. I'd also like to observe other teachers' lessons, and I'd like to have more discussions with other teachers. And of course, I'd like to research different teaching ideas and methods. These are some of the ideas I have for overcoming some of the issues I talked about previously, and a lot of them are tied in with the goals of the practicum and tasks within the practicum. Here are some of my initial plans for completing the observation hours. For my supervised lessons, this happens to be a lot of what I do every day. I have regular classes, which I'm almost always, there will be another teacher in the classroom, and these can serve as my supervised lessons. My observed lessons are a bit more difficult. It's hard to observe other teachers' lessons while I'm teaching, so I'll have to do this after hours. I can do this by community lessons, which can hopefully serve as my observation hours, and also self-observation by videoing myself while teaching and then watching it later. And next, I'd like to watch some YouTube videos of teachers teaching, and also I've been talking to some coworkers about making videos of their classes, and I hope to observe those. Lastly, I'd like to work on my cooperative lessons by team teaching with some of my regular classes in which I work with other teachers to teach. In conclusion, developing teaching skills is a lifelong effort that should not end after finishing school or training. As Takeji Hayashi, as cited in Crook's 2003, tells us, that teaching is equal to learning. As teachers, we must strive to keep learning how to teach in order to adapt to our ever-changing teaching environments from year to year. In this effort, I feel that this course should be a very good experience to help me facilitate learning through my teaching. I think that many of my efforts to overcome my weaknesses will be facilitated through the process of observation, supervised teaching, and collaborations. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to working with you this semester.